focus and intelligence are things that all of us want, but how do you achieve that, right? It's a lot of people think that it's doing more of those things, being put into those scenarios, but it's much, much deeper than that. When we look at the nervous system, it gives us the answers to this. I'm Dr. Jeff Cumro, and over the past 15 years, I've been blessed to work with over 5,000 patients. I've studied functional medicine and functional neurology, how our body makes energy, movement in depth, a lot of different things to ultimately get patients the outcomes that they're looking for. And that's kind of where all of this is going to come together today. It's not one thing. It's not the functional medicine. It's not chiropractic. It's not the functional neurology. It's bringing all of this together. Because when we look at all of our capabilities, we're not just one-dimensional beings, right? We have so many different things that we bring together that make us us. And when we don't have those working, it's difficult. It's kind of a slog, right? So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about ultimately how this comes together. And we're going to do a little bit of drawing. It's not going to be anything too in-depth, thankfully, because my drawing skills really need work. But it's going to help you kind of understand some of this, I think. And where a lot of this comes from is we have to have sensory processing as the very bottom step of things. So that sensation allows other systems to develop inside of our brain. If we don't have sensation, it's very, very difficult. And we see a lot of kids right now that have sensory processing errors of different kinds, right? They get around loud noises, they don't handle it real well. Tags drive them crazy. They don't have as good a feeling as they should. And we see this in adults too, in neuropathy and different things like that. Numbness and radiculopathy, there's different ways that this happens. But in children, it's a lot more damaging to the outcomes, I guess, with lack of better ways to put this, because their brain is still developing. So it's reliant on that to develop these systems up here. If we don't have full development, then that obviously sets people back for other things. In adults, it still sets things back because, yes, you have that development up there, but if you stop stimulating an area, what happens to it? The brain is the ultimate use it or lose it thing. So we've got to have that constant input in there. And so sensory function is number one on this. And what that sensory function does is, like I said, it feeds into the brain. And the way that this all relates to chiropractic is sensory function is one of the best things that chiropractic does. It is phenomenal at this. What we're doing is we're working to get the body and the brain to work together. And when we have the body and the brain communicating as well as possible, that clear communication, it allows for the outcomes that we want to get, right? So the whole goal of the brain is to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. If we want to go get food, we want to be able to go and get food. If we need a drink of water, we need to go and get a drink of water. That's ultimately what the brain was designed for. We have to have that sensory function to give us clues as to how we're doing on that. If you take a drink of water and you miss and pour it on your shoulder, you need to know that. And that's part of where the sensory aspects come in. But that sensory allows for better movement, right? And when we move the way that we're supposed to, it takes a lot of strain off the muscles and the joints. The joints give us a lot of this sensory information. The thing that when we do an adjustment, that chiropractic adjustment, it stimulates motion receptors inside of those joints that send signals up to the brain. If we don't have proper signaling up there, then, like I said, everything else kind of falls apart. This is why exercise is so important as well. So it's not just chiropractic, it is exercise, it is movement. When we take those joints through a full range of motion, we stimulate this sensory processing and we give our brain some of that nutrition that it needs, right? The stimulation is ultimately what drives nerve function. So we have to stimulate those things to keep them active. And when we stimulate that, this does better. The joints do better because they have better feedback. And overall, we end up with better movement. Now, the way that this develops inside of the brain is that sensory feedback goes down into vestibular feedback. And vestibular system is your balance, right? So a lot of people say, I have excellent balance. And we put them on a computerized test, and it shows that their balance is not nearly as good as what they think it is. And the reason that they think it's good is they don't fall over, right? That's what they think balance is. They don't put themselves into positions very often where they're standing on something that's uneven and they have their eyes closed. They don't stand on something and close their eyes in general. They don't have that test of the sensation. Those are the three things that make up the balance process. 70% of it is vestibular in nature. And like I said, if you have enough muscularity, you're going to be able to cover up some of these weaknesses in here. So we put people on there, and it shows that their vestibular system is very, very poor. So when we put them into a situation with their eyes closed on something that's uneven, you start wobbling and feeling all of that unsteadiness. That vestibular system is not working as well as it should be. And you may notice this as an adult as, in children, you'll see it as like clumsiness. You'll see it as, they're spending a lot of time like spinning and swinging and trying to stimulate that. But in adults, you'll see it more as like car sickness. You'll see it as, vertigo. You'll see it as just kind of that unsteady feeling. But you may also see it where people like walk along and they're leaning to one side, running into walls and different things like that. So it shows up in different ways. But this is very, very important because if we don't have that proper vestibular system, we end up having trouble tracking things with the eyes. Now, why is this important? Because in kids, we have problems with reading. We have problems with different things like that. And reading is much more in depth than what most people think. It's not a skill where you can just read and read more and read more and get better and better and better at it. If these mechanisms below it are not working the way that they're supposed to, we have to work on those little micro skills because it's made up of a bunch of tiny little skills. So it's kind of like your job. If you go to work and somebody only knows one tiny aspect of your job, they can do that one tiny aspect, but they're going to fall apart when they try and do everything else, right? Same thing happens here. If they only have this one aspect of this, they're not going to be able to do it by doing more of it. They have to learn what their errors are. We need this vestibular system to give the clues to those eyes. And then after the eyes have developed properly, then we can, track objects. This is, again, where some of that, car sickness comes in. It's where some of the reading issues come in. Focus, in kids, you'll see a lot of issues with, the kid's misbehaving in school. The kid can't focus in school. His eyes aren't working the way that they're supposed to, which is making it very difficult. So his eyes are not staying on the target that he wants them to stay on for like reading. If you're trying to read this word and your eyes are constantly jumping off, it looks like you're inattentive because every little thing attracts your eyes off there and you pay attention to that little thing instead of that one word there. And it looks like they don't want to focus, but that's not necessarily the case. In most cases, that's not the case. It also shows up in behavior because stereotypically when kids aren't good at something, what do? They go do something else, right? So, behavioral issues start to come out. You see kids starting to joke around more or do things like that because they don't want the attention to be on their reading. They want to be the focus on something else so that their weaknesses are not brought out. They're protecting their ego. And, it's sad to see those kids in these situations. So, after that, that's where we see the upper level things. So academics and decision making, things like that start to come up. So goal planning, all this, so future tensing everything. So all of these upper level decisions are above and beyond that. So we have to have all of these things stacked in order. So like I said, chiropractic plays a big, big role in all of this because if we don't have this sensory function feeding this, then all of this down here comprises brain function, right? We've got to have that movement. We've got to have that sensation to drive the delivery of all of this stuff. And if we don't build a strong house on all of this, what happens? So imagine that this is your foundation on one, this is your foundation on another. This is not nearly as strong as this, right? It's smaller, so you're not going to be able to put as much on. So if we only have the sensation developed to this level, this up here, this vestibular system or the eyes or whatever it may be, are only going to be able to develop to a smaller extent. So, you can't build as high on any of those. So it starts to get smaller and smaller as this goes up. Whereas here, you can build another solid foundation there and another solid foundation on top of that and another one. So you could build much higher. So we get much higher output. We get much better, I guess for lack of better words, we get much better skill set, right? So it's much stronger functionality. Not only does this protect you in the short term, this protects you in the long term, because if we run into a situation where we have a concussion or we run into an inflammatory process or a degenerative process, if we start eroding this down here, that goes away pretty quickly, right? Whereas if we have this strong foundation, we start eroding this, it doesn't go away as fast. Now, obviously, we want to protect this throughout life, and that's where diet and nutrition and the other aspects of chiropractic come in. When we balance all of those together, we have a holistic output. And a lot of people look at holistic and they're like, we're a holistic healthcare practice, and they do one thing. That's not a holistic practice. To look at holistic things, we have to look at all of the inputs coming in and how they go about. So we've got to have the diet, we've got to have the sleep, we've got to have the stress, we've got to have that immune functionality, we've got to have the development, we've got to have the metabolic capacity. All of this has to come together to build the system. And that's ultimately what we do with chiropractic for kids, chiropractic for adults, and everybody in between, right? So if you have questions on this, reach out to me. Like I said, I don't want this to be too in-depth, but this is the pattern for how we have to develop things. And if we don't have that proper patterning, then we don't have this up here. And these levels in here are what goes back and blocks out the stress and the overactive immune system, which sounds like a good thing, right? Hey, I'm not going to get sick. You can only run that immune system for so long because it's putting out so much output. In that area is also the emotionality. It's also the impulsivity. So it's controlling all of those things. So having this up here is so important for success in anything that we do. And if we're dragging behind on any of that, it's going to be a difficult slog. So chiropractic plays a big role in that. If you want to talk further about how that applies to you or your family, reach out to me. As always, I appreciate you watching this. I know that this takes your time and attention. Those are your most valuable resources. And I hope you have a phenomenal week. I'll catch you on next week's video.